The story begins on a cold November evening when a young woman, barely more than a teenager, found herself suddenly alone and without a home. She had been thrown out by the very people who were supposed to protect her. Perhaps family members who could no longer afford to keep her, or who had grown tired of the burden she represented in their struggling household. With only a few dollars in her pocket and the clothes on her back, she wandered through the fading light, the wind biting at her skin as temperatures dropped toward freezing. The world felt indifferent and harsh, the kind of place where survival was not guaranteed for someone so young and unprepared. She walked along the outskirts of town, following the curve of a river that wound its way through the landscape, its banks steep and overgrown with brush and scattered rocks. Desperation pushed her forward because turning back meant facing rejection again. And the streets offered no warmth or safety as night fell. As darkness deepened, she stumbled upon a narrow opening in the riverbank, a crack that looked like nothing more than a fissure in the earth at first glance. It was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, hidden partially by overhanging roots and fallen leaves. Curiosity mixed with necessity drove her to investigate. She had heard stories of people finding shelter in caves or abandoned structures during hard times. But this seemed different, more primitive and uncertain. With her heart pounding, she dropped to her hands and knees and began to crawl inside, the rough stones scraping against her palms and knees. The passage was tight, forcing her to twist her body and push forward inch by inch, her breath coming in short gasps as the cold air outside gave way to something unexpected. The further she went, the more the temperature seemed to change. After pushing about 30 feet into the crack, she noticed a profound difference. The air around her felt remarkably warm, almost like stepping into a heated room on a winter day. It was steady at around 80 degrees Fahrenheit, a constant, comforting warmth that contrasted sharply with the freezing conditions just outside. This discovery was no accident of nature in a simple sense. It stemmed from the geology of the area. The riverbank crack led into a natural formation, possibly connected to underground thermal activity or stable earth temperatures that maintained a moderate climate deep inside. In many parts of the world, especially in regions with certain rock compositions or proximity to geothermal influences, the ground can hold heat from the Earth's core or from seasonal stability, creating microclimates where the temperature remains consistent year-round. For her, it was a lifeline. She had entered what felt like a hidden sanctuary, a place where the biting November wind could not reach. The walls were smooth in places from years of water erosion or mineral deposits, and the floor was relatively dry, allowing her to sit and catch her breath without immediate discomfort. The warmth enveloped her like a blanket, easing the ache in her muscles and the chill that had settled into her bones during her wanderings. In the days that followed, she began to transform this narrow crack into a makeshift home. At first, survival was basic. She gathered what little she could find nearby, dry branches, leaves, and perhaps some discarded materials from the river's edge, to create a small bedding area. The constant 80-degree temperature meant she did not need to worry about building a fire right away, which was fortunate because smoke might have drawn attention or caused issues in the confined space. Instead, the Earth's natural insulation kept her body heat from escaping too quickly, and the stable warmth prevented hypothermia, a real threat for anyone exposed to November's cold nights. She rationed the small amount of money she had, buying minimal food supplies from a distant store and bringing them back carefully so as not to reveal her location. Water was accessible from the river, though she had to be cautious about contamination, boiling it when possible using a small portable method or simply filtering it through cloth. As weeks turned into months, her adaptation deepened. She explored further into the crack, discovering that it widened slightly in places, allowing her to stand or even create small storage nooks. She lined the walls with whatever insulating materials she could scavenge, old newspapers, fabric scraps, or natural moss, to make the space feel more secure and less like a bare cave. The psychological aspect was as challenging as the physical one. Being thrown out had left emotional scars, feelings of abandonment, fear of the unknown, and a deep sense of isolation. Yet the warmth of the riverbank crack became a symbol of resilience. It reminded her that even in the most unlikely places, nature could provide if one was willing to look closely and take risks. She spent hours reflecting on her past, thinking about the circumstances that led to her expulsion. Perhaps it was poverty, family conflict, or societal pressures that forced the decision. Whatever the reason, she resolved not to let it define her future. The steady temperature became her ally, allowing her to conserve energy that would otherwise be spent fighting the cold. Winter fully arrived, bringing snow and ice to the outside world. Blizzards raged above ground, but inside her 30-foot-deep sanctuary, the air remained balmy at 80 degrees. This consistency was fascinating from a scientific perspective. Underground environments often maintain temperatures close to the annual average of the region, because the Earth acts as a thermal mass, absorbing and releasing heat slowly. In this case, the riverbank's location might have amplified that effect through groundwater flow or mineral content that retained warmth. For the young woman, it meant she could sleep soundly without shivering, wake up without frost on her makeshift blanket, and even maintain a small area for personal hygiene without freezing water. She learned to manage her resources wisely, venturing out only during daylight for necessities and returning before dusk to avoid detection. Rumors might have circulated in town about a mysterious figure near the river, but she stayed hidden, prioritizing safety over social contact. Her daily routine evolved into a rhythm of quiet determination. Mornings involved checking the entrance for any signs of disturbance, then tending to her small space, sweeping away debris, organizing supplies, and perhaps reading a salvaged book if she had one to pass the time and keep her mind sharp. Nutrition was a constant concern. She foraged for edible plants when the weather allowed and supplemented with inexpensive staples like rice, beans, and canned goods. The warmth allowed her to store food without rapid spoilage, another small mercy. Physically, the crawling entrance kept her agile, strengthening her body in unexpected ways as she navigated the tight spaces. Mentally, she battled loneliness by talking to herself or imagining conversations with future versions of herself who had overcome this hardship. The story of her survival highlights themes of human ingenuity and the will to endure. Many people in similar situations might have given up or sought conventional shelters like homeless services. But she chose this hidden path, perhaps out of distrust or a desire for independence. Over time, she improved her shelter significantly. She fashioned a better bed from layered natural materials and found objects, creating a barrier against the hard ground. Ventilation was managed naturally through the crack's design, preventing stuffiness while maintaining the warmth. She even experimented with small modifications, like reinforcing weak spots in the passage to prevent collapses during heavy rains. The river provided not only water, but also a source of fish or other resources on good days, though she was careful not to overfish or draw attention. As spring approached, the outside world thawed, but her attachment to the warm crack grew. It had become more than shelter. It was a testament to her ability to adapt when the system failed her. Friends or family who had thrown her out might never know the full extent of her struggle, but she carried the experience as a source of inner strength. This narrative speaks to broader issues in society: the vulnerability of young people facing homelessness, the lack of support systems, and the surprising ways nature can offer solutions when human ones fall short. The 80-degree warmth 30 feet in was not magic, but a practical geological feature that saved her life during the critical winter months. It allowed her body to recover from the initial shock of exposure and gave her the stability needed to plan her next steps. Eventually, as seasons changed and she gained confidence, she might have used the time in the crack to learn skills, save small amounts of money, or connect discreetly with opportunities that led to better circumstances. The story does not end in permanent isolation. Rather, it illustrates a turning point where desperation met discovery and survival turned into empowerment. Expanding on the emotional journey. Imagine the fear she felt on that first night crawling in. The uncertainty of whether the crack would lead to safety or danger like unstable rocks or animals. Yet the warmth washed over those fears, providing immediate relief and a spark of hope. She thought about others who might be in similar plights, runaways, displaced individuals, or those affected by economic hardship, and wondered if such natural refuges existed elsewhere. In reality, similar tales exist in survival literature, where people use caves, mines, or natural formations for shelter, relying on geothermal stability or earth insulation. The constant temperature reduced her caloric needs slightly, as her body did not have to work as hard to maintain core heat, allowing limited food supplies to stretch further. Socially, her isolation fostered introspection. She reflected on the events leading to being thrown out. Perhaps arguments over resources, differing expectations, or external pressures like job loss in the family. November's timing amplified the drama, as it marked the shift from autumn mildness to winter severity, making outdoor survival nearly impossible without her find. The riverbank, with its flowing water masking sounds and providing a natural boundary, added to the concealment. She learned to listen to the river's rhythm as a clock, noting how its sounds changed with weather. Inside, the silence was profound, broken only by occasional drips or her own movements, creating a meditative space unusual for someone so young. Physically, the environment posed challenges too. The confined space meant limited movement, so she incorporated exercises like stretching and crawling drills to stay fit. Dust or minerals in the air required her to improvise masks from cloth. Yet the warmth prevented common winter ailments like colds or joint stiffness that plague the homeless. As she settled in, she might have decorated her space minimally with found objects, a smooth stone as a paperweight, dried flowers for a touch of beauty, to maintain dignity and morale. This act of claiming the space transformed it from a random crack into her personal domain, a place of agency in a life that had stripped so much away. The broader implications of such a story touch on resilience training, off-grid living concepts, and even environmental awareness. The Earth's natural warmth demonstrates sustainable heating ideas that modern architecture sometimes mimics through passive solar or geothermal systems. For her, it was raw and immediate, a lesson in observing one's surroundings closely. Friends she might make later would hear fragments of this tale and marvel at the details. The tight crawl, the sudden shift to 80 degrees, the sense of entering another world. It became a foundational chapter in her life narrative, one she could draw upon during future hardships to remind herself that solutions often hide in plain, yet unexpected places. In reflecting deeply, one sees how this experience reshaped her worldview. Being thrown out taught her self-reliance, while the riverbank crack taught her trust in nature's provisions. The warmth was not just physical but symbolic, representing inner fire and potential that persists even in cold rejection. She emerged from the winter stronger, perhaps pursuing education, work, or relationships with a quiet confidence born from those months alone. The story encourages anyone facing adversity to look for the cracks in their own situations, opportunities disguised as obstacles, and to persist until warmth, literal or metaphorical, reveals itself. It is a tale of transformation, where a moment of crisis on a November night led to a profound discovery 30 feet into the earth, changing one life forever through courage, observation, and the steady embrace of the planet's hidden gifts.